Hello again. Welcome to our study, Dinosaurs in the Bible. This is study number 3 of 4. If you haven't viewed the other two, chapter 1 and chapter 2, go back and do that. So, are there dinosaurs in the Bible? Let's continue our quest to find out exactly if there were and what happened. Father, once again, we're thankful for the creation that you gave us and the fact that we are here and that we live here for a period of time. And as we ponder these questions, we understand the question that remains for us where we'll spend eternity with you or somewhere else. Bless us in our endeavors as we serve you and continue to wait until that day. All of these questions will be answered. We'll give you thanks and praise for it. In Jesus' name. Dinosaurs in the Bible, study number 3. Well, using the biblical text, we see dinosaurs were created by God on day 6 of creation, approximately 6,000 years ago. Dinosaurs were originally vegetarian. They were not the voracious animals depicted in movies. That happened later. During the global flood, many were buried and fossilized, but 2 of each kind survived on Noah's Ark. Interesting. Well, evolutionists will claim that dinosaurs lived some 65 million years ago. The Bible states that God made the land animals, which included dinosaurs, on day 6. We find that in Genesis 1, verses 24 and 25. See, dinosaurs eventually died out due to climate change, human activity, and other factors. To date, there are some 70 to 80 categories of different dinosaur species. Most of them were no bigger than an average buffalo or a baby elephant. They weren't these big voracious creatures that we see on TV and in the movies. Well, accepting the words of the Bible, you come to the conclusion that the creation of earth and animals included dinosaurs that occurred only thousands of years ago, not millions. Thus, dinosaurs may have lived within the last few thousands of years. Two great creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan, are described by God in the book of Job, chapters 40 and 41. Now, some commentators have suggested that Behemoth was an elephant or a hippo, but that description simply doesn't match. It talks about a tail like a cedar, and you see what we see as sauropod there, and yeah, that has a tail like a cedar. But it appears God is describing a sauropod dinosaur. The pictured here is the animal references it was also a plant eater. It was a herbivore. It is distinct in the description as the tail is like a cedar, and yeah, I guess that's appropriate in size. In Job 41, we see another animal referenced as Leviathan. From the text, we read of a sea-dwelling creature and has the capacity to dwell on land as well. We find that in Job 41, verses 25 and 30. Now, scholars have often referenced this animal to our alligator or crocodile. Well, God makes it quite clear in Job chapter 41 that to battle against this creature would be foolish. Interesting as it is, in late 2008, paleontologists uncovered a massive 3-meter long fossilized skull belonging to an ancient mega-toothed sperm whale, as they termed it. It was located in the Ica Desert of southern Peru. And there's that particular skull. Now, it's about 10 feet long, give or take. You obviously wouldn't want to fool with that thing. That's exactly what Job says in chapter 41. Don't mess with this thing. It wouldn't go well if you did. As a result of the passage in Genesis where God made man and animals on day 6, and in the book of Job where God tells Job he created him with the animals, biblical creationists believe that man and dinosaurs lived at the same time. God describes 2 creatures that Job was very much well aware of. See, there's historical evidence of dinosaurs and man living together, such as the petroglyph and natural bridges in Utah, legends and stories of dragons in Europe and dragon motif in China. Cave paintings that are like the description we see of dinosaurs, they've been found. Well, the Kachina Bridge is best known among visitors and researchers for a controversial carving that strongly resembles a sauropod dinosaur, like a Apatosaurus, with a long neck, body, and tail. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Dr. Mary Schweitzer and her team caught the world's attention with a science paper in 2005 that described intact blood cells and red blood cells in a T. rex bone. Now, they took a T. rex bone that was supposed to be 65 million years ago, and they did analysis on it, and they found interesting things. See, it's not the first time this has been discovered, but secular scientists often disregard anything that discredits their theory of evolution. In other words, anything to disprove the Bible, they'll state it. See, soft tissue, it lost long periods of time within bones, but not 65 million years old, as the scientist declares. So the bone that she took from a T-Rex and opened it up and saw soft tissue and red blood cells, soft, obviously that starts to shoot holes in the evolution idea that, hey, these guys were 65 million years ago when they existed. Maybe not. Well, here's the big question. Were there dinosaurs on the ark? Now, according to some of your scholars, they state this in Genesis 6 and 19. And of every living thing of all the flesh, two of every sort shall you bring into the ark to keep them alive with ye. They shall be male and female. Okay, we get that. Then verse number 20. Of fowls after their kind, of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind. Two of every sort shall come unto you to keep them alive. Does that mean sauropod dinosaurs? Apparently so. Well, considering the Genesis account, there were dinosaurs, land vertebrates. They were represented on the ark. See, right now there are approximately 668 names of dinosaurs. There are perhaps some 70 different to 80 different kinds of dinosaurs, and majority of them were not that big at all. But then we get to the point where in Job chapter 41 talks about fire-breathing dragons. Is that real? I mean, can we understand that? Well, the Bible does not explicitly mention fire-breathing dragons by that modern English term. However, the Old Testament describes a sea creature called Leviathan, and the book of Job, chapter 41, famously portrays this creature as breathing fire and smoke. We look at Job 41, verses 19 through 21. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostril goes smoke, as out of a seething pot or cauldron. His breath kindles coals, and flames go out of his mouth. Now, that's fire breathing any way you look at it. And what we find now, today, you can find them. The bombardier beetle can do just about the same thing. We find that in study number 1. I suggest you go there and check it out. Ancient historians declared dragons to be an accurate description of creatures that existed in their time, and the fact that they were not only there, but how do we defeat them? They couldn't. Only God can defeat the creation of this thing called Leviathan. Well, now we hear this now. Feathered dinosaurs? Did the dinosaurs have feathers? Well, winged creatures were created on day 5, as the Genesis narrative states. Dinosaurs were created on day 6. Now, paleontologists state that, yes, many dinosaurs definitely had feathers. However, the evidence is consistent with what the Bible teaches about birds being unique and created after their own kind. Well, we understand Hollywood has made a fortune building dinosaurs as graphic computer simulations. Unfortunately, these movies Although entertaining, they seek to steer us away from the true origin of God's creation. They quietly but effectively lead people astray, pushing the masses toward the theory of evolution. In other words, anything that we can do to disprove the Bible, that's what we're going to do. And Jurassic Park did just that. So, 4,300 years ago, what happened? Well, it's estimated that some 4,300 years ago, the Ark of Noah rested on the mountains of Ararat in modern-day Turkey. On board the ark were animals that Noah was told to take with him. Among those animals were the dinosaurs. As we are aware, the world had changed in many ways, as well as the world's climate. Lack of food, the activities of man, slowly caused the demise of the animals termed dinosaurs. They just decayed. It was thought by scholars that the landmass prior to the flood was one large continent. The landmass broke apart and there were developed what scientists term continental drift. The separate continents we see today are a result of that slow process, and the animals that we see that we only find on one continent, such as the kangaroo, are a direct result of the continental drift. According to some scientists, the animals that we see that are indigenous to that continent were those animals that migrated there prior to the separation of these continents. Well, the flood and the layers of earth that geologists discover give credence to these facts. These animals that were not on board the ark were fossilized quickly as a result of catastrophic changes to the earth. In other words, you can't fossilize anything without pressure, and it has to be done quickly. A lot of pressure, very, very quickly. That's how things are fossilized. Other than that, things that die basically just decay. The soft tissue, like blood vessels and red blood cells that have been found in dinosaur bones, tell a story. The soft tissue couldn't last 65 million years, especially that long. Further, the very act of something becoming a fossil takes extreme pressure and a short duration of time. And she, the lady that discovered that, was not the only one to do it. It has been happened over and over again, which they do their best to disprove because they did something wrong somewhere. Soft tissue is soft tissue, and you find it in a bone that you claim to be 65 million years ago, well, guess what? Doesn't add up. Well, while the evolutionists proclaimed that man evolved some 3 million years after the dinosaurs went extinct, the passage in Genesis 1, verses 25 and 26, as well as Job 40:15, they tell a different story. God says, I created them with you. Job was well aware of both the behemoth and Leviathan that God had placed on his creation with Job. What God describes are not allegories or illustrations, but real animals, and Job knew this. Well, the questions we ask are often not answered. Why? I mean, why do we have all these questions that we don't get answers for? Well, the Bible we share is an integrated message from God to man. The message of the Bible is simply God declaring that man will live eternally somewhere. We see God revealing himself in many different ways, but never as an encyclopedia to answer all the questions we ask. God is concerned with man's redemption rather than when the dinosaurs became extinct or millions of other questions that we think about. Rather than debate the mysteries that God alone holds the answers to, we need to ponder where eternity will find us when our days are done. Is Christ your Savior? Is he your Redeemer? Or are you all worried about 65 million year old bones that are not quite that old? The question is yours. The decision is yours. Serve him now or you'll be sorry. So, we'll finish this study on the next one. Be safe, be blessed. We'll see you then.